Eva Yazhari on the call, and Eva has written a book called The Good Your Money Can Do. And this is something that I think is really especially of interest and important because I actually, in real estate investing, and we've talked about this time and time again, and just a few episodes ago, I had on Rod Cleef, and Rod and I spent a good 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes talking about goal setting and everything. But I don't think we, as a lot of real estate investors, have sat down and planned this out and thought about how our money and how the good it can actually do. I think that's actually as important as anything else. So I really appreciate you being on the show.
I'm really happy to be here, Jack. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And also, as somewhat of a real estate investor myself personally, I have been able to think about what makes real estate an optimal sector for doing good with your money. And I'm happy to looking forward to unpacking that with you.
Yeah. So make sure everybody check this out. Her podcast is she's at has a podcast. It's called the Beyond Capital Podcast. So I'm sure you delve into this quite often there. And I know you have real estate investors that cycle through there on occasion and have some great conversations. But go to thegoodyourmoneycando.com. Great domain name. And then the book is also called The Good Your Money Can Do. So head over to Amazon for that. Um, but first of all, I'm always curious. Like, what made you decide to write a book about this topic?
Yeah, great question. Well, I worked on Wall Street, and I was working on Wall Street during the subprime mortgage crisis. So I don't know how that's played into your conversations over the years, but was
Mhm.
certainly an event for me, and is actually a topic that an anecdote that I share in the book. But I was very fortunate to advance in the hedge fund business, get to spend a lot of time with what we call activist hedge fund managers, those that kind of rattle the cage, corporate, almost kind of corporate raider types. And I thought a lot about what more money could do and
Mhm.
how, frankly, the best thing that money can do is good. And so I actually left Wall Street to try to figure out what that meant for me and ended up starting a venture capital fund that I've been running for the past 12 years. But I was basically living in two worlds. I was living in the world of VC, where I had an impact component, the social impact component to my work. And then I
Mhm.
was living in the world of, my friends, professionals, whoever they were, whether they were finance or doctors or lawyers or consultants, and I could see that there was no connection between my friends and my kind of social networks and then my professional networks. And my social networks had no clue how to align their values with their money. And so I wrote this book to inspire readers to think about their money as a force for good, to find a way to clean up their money. I mean, we've lived in a world where we're cleaning up everything, what we eat, maybe even our cleaning products at home. We've never really thought about our money. And I think when you start thinking about what more your money can do, the good your money can do, you can apply it to all different sectors, including real estate.
Sure. Well, you just mentioned values. I actually think that that is something that is a particular interest. Like, I don't think people have taken the time to actually sit down and define their values and then apply that towards their investing.
Yeah, Jack, it would take us all an hour to sit down with a piece of paper and start that process. And as a hard nosed investor, I would also say that it would enable a more systematic approach to the good our money can do. It wouldn't just be, oh, my friend asked me to contribute to this cause. It would be, wow, I know that opportunity zones are a great place to get started with my real estate portfolio. And I know somebody actually that runs an opportunity zone fund. And so I'm going to go talk to that person and align my values more with my money if, those stated values happen to be in line with, what the fund is investing in. So I think really it does start with the process of defining your values, maybe asking yourself, how are you brought up? What were some of your family values? What are even some of your biases that you're working on today? And how can they be incorporated into your money as a way to express those values?
Hmm. So are you saying that only the way you're investing your money, but you know, see, what I'm trying to get at is that in most scenarios, like we've been trained and we've been talked about, whether you're investing a 401k or an IRA, you kind of put your money in there, kind of set it and forget it. In
Hmm.
most cases, I don't know what companies are a part of that portfolio, let alone, there might be companies in there as a value I might not approve of, but I'm just kind of blindly throwing it in there. Is that
Yeah.
kind of one of the aspects?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody who listens to this podcast could resonate with the fact that we care about our career, we care about our families, we care about our consumer choices, we stick to our values in those areas, and we typically know our worth, but we don't really think about it when we think about our money because we're taught to save, spend, and invest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. As you say, set it and forget it, which is, it's a great strategy for wealth building, for wealth preservation over time, because, in the end, markets do tend to rise in the long term. But ultimately, I think what you do miss is that your money may not be aligned with your values, and you might wake up one day thinking, whether it's the climate emergency or whether you want to see a world that's more representative of everybody on the planet, you might wake up one day and realize that your money is not aligned with your values. And a couple examples of that include, as you rightly pointed out, companies in your portfolio that may be harmful to areas that you think should be better impacted, but also where your money sleeps at night. So in
Mm-hmm.
my book, we talk about where your money is put in a bank and then where it might be loaned out could actually be antithetical to your values. And I personally have kind of gone down the research path of understanding where money can be lent in more local communities, or even to real estate projects that are local rather than at a massive scale to big companies that probably aren't fully representing what we all care about as basic and kind of normal citizens.
Well, when I was looking through your book, one of the chapters here that what I think you're leading to is even now, it's probably going to even be amplified. Chapter 3 is called The Moral Imperative of Doing Good. I mean,
Yep.
there's a moral obligation there in order for your investing.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we are in the world today, I think climate change is probably number one. It's happening. And the reality is, we do have a moral imperative to invest in a way that helps to stop it. I mean, I have children, and I think that one of the best motivators is to ask investors to think about the world that they're leaving for their kids. But one of the most exciting opportunities of the good your money can do is that it is not a trade off with financial return. And that's a myth. So there's pretty much every single asset class that you want to invest in. And again, knowing this is focused on real estate, there are many opportunities where there can be similar yields, similar returns to what investors are getting on perhaps less impactful opportunities. So just kind of coming back to the moral imperative, I think it couples really well with an opportunity. And I'm a glass half full person. I tend to shy away from the problems and really only focusing on the problems. So I flip that coin really quickly. But I also am very grateful for my own personal upbringing, my privilege, and where I am today. And I do believe that I have the responsibility to do good with my resources.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that you don't feel limited that we are talking on a real estate investing podcast, because it's just been one of my personal battles. I feel like as real estate investors, we get very hyper focused, we get blinders on, and there's a bigger part of the conversation when it comes to our finances that we need to be a part
Mm.
of that conversation. We can't limit ourselves either.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, well, first of all, one of the premises of my book is that wealth is more than money.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just your money, it is your relationships, your voice, your social networks, your resources that go beyond money. Maybe it's your skills that you have. And I think that using the framework of what I call conscious investing is thinking about how you're using all of your resources to align with your values. And so, real estate investor or not, that's a very powerful thing to do, to wake up every single day knowing that you are fully walking the talk. And the ways, the kind of ways that I describe it in the book are, of course, starting with, we mentioned the bank account, starting with thinking about your investments. Do you want to be more active with aligning them with your values and pointing out particular issue areas, and then implementing that in your portfolio? Or do you want to be more passive and say, I'm okay with a fund that just does no harm? Because that is very widely available. But then stepping outside of your money, there is your consumer choices, your active citizenry. If you don't agree, or you're even just voting and using democracy as a verb, quote unquote, which is a quote from a family member of mine that was in politics for a number of years. So in general, I think the whole life strategy is really the mindset shift that happens, that starts to open up so many possibilities. And as an investor myself, when I brought in concepts from other disciplines and became a little bit more creative with my approach, it really influenced my investing as well. So I couldn't agree with you more that thinking of outside of the real estate box is very important for investors.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of those things that between, I everybody who listens to the show has heard me not only praise Rich Dad Poor Dad, everybody has read that book,
Love that.
but Go Giver. I if you've ever read Go Giver, that's another one of these books that basically talks directly to what you're saying, is that, and I don't think we spend that time, now that I'm even talking to you, is like the first time in a while that I've considered that it's just not the money that we can invest in, use as an investment, but our time and resources and skills is also an investment, whether it's in your community or whether it's towards an organization or a cause.
Absolutely. I mean, to give you an example from my own life, I went to an all-girls university, and it took me about a decade to kind of circle back. And I was very busy. I had two children, 15 years since I had graduated. I've had two kids and built my family. But now I sit on one of their leadership councils, and it is an important component of my life to give skills back to young budding entrepreneurs that are interested in starting businesses, because that's what I do. I look at startups all day long in my work. And so whatever that is for you and whatever that is for your listener, I think it can be really empowering to use those resources. And then we create a world where we don't necessarily have a hierarchy of wealth, where it isn't the haves and the have-nots. And I think it is problematic that the billionaires of the world dictate where philanthropy goes. And I think it would be nice if, we could talk to our neighbors about where they're contributing to socially or environmentally, and connect around those issues. And generally, there are groups, I think, that are told that money is not for them, particularly women, particularly lower earners. And in general, the concept of conscious investing and investing with your values really opens up that discussion, because we can talk about so much more than just financial return.
Sure. So just to remind everybody, head over to thegoodyourmoneycando.com. That's going to give you information regarding the book and some additional resources. And then check out the podcast, the Beyond Capital podcast, available on your favorite podcasting app.
Absolutely.
But, I always like to just give people some takeaway and some actionable things that they can do now. Like,
Yep.
is there like where, if they want to make a conscious effort to do what you're suggesting, where should they start?
Yeah. Well, the book is a playbook. So, picking up the book is a great way to have that playbook right in front of you. But essentially, as we talked about previously, it is about defining your values and knowing what you own. So take a look at what you own, take a look at what you're buying, cultivate what we call wealth consciousness, the
Mm-hmm.
awareness of where your money and time and resources are being utilized. And ask yourself, does that line up with your values? If it does, awesome. If it doesn't, you might want to make some changes. And I like to say, we're living in a time where we are lucky enough to have a material impact on a social problem or an environmental problem in many ways with little sacrifice to our own lives. And so we're very lucky that we're kind of living at this turning point where there are so many opportunities to incorporate our values into our daily lives. But again, not really needing a trade-off on financial return. All the products are still as good as, the organic cotton is even better.
Hmm.
And so I think that that motivator is really important. But I would say, aside from defining your values and sitting down and doing that, it's really knowing what you own and cultivating this awareness of connecting to what you own. And then you can start to go out and find ways to incorporate more of your values into all of your areas of wealth.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Like when you're defining this, is it good to sit down with your, like if you're married, a significant other, and kind of so that you got that aligned goals together?
I do think if you're investing with a partner, that is helpful to align around those particular areas, because it, I think it is better to kind of focus. It can be harder to have 5 different areas of focus and truly zero in on all of them. As I mentioned thematically, some of the areas that I'm very focused on right now are gender and
Hmm.
climate,
Sure.
and also just diversity and inclusion in general. But my spouse is also aligned with that.
Hmm.
And we are very lucky that we have typically very, very similar things that we're focused on. But I do think it is important to sit down with your spouse. I would say to maybe all of your female listeners, though, you know, know that the kind of wealth consciousness, that is a
Oh,
narrative that has been told to women. Did I cut out?
yeah, you cut out there, and I think it was an important piece. So I was hoping maybe
Okay.
you could back up like 20 seconds there and try to say that again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I would say to all of the female listeners out there, know that the language of money is something that you can master too, and is, really important for you to be a part of that conversation. And personally, I've found in my own marriage that the equality in the relationship has been expressed in how we view equality in the world, which is why we're focused on, I mentioned, gender equality and diversity and inclusion. But I actually think it really does start in the couple. So that's a great question. And it is important because you do need to focus a little bit to make an impact.
Yeah, I might have asked it in a strange way, but in what I was trying to get at is that, not only are we, a lot of investors probably like the first time they've actually sat down and thought about writing down their values, but it might be the first time they've sat down and expressed it and communicated that with their significant other. I mean, it's it's something that you really have to be honest with yourself about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a tough process. I mean, it could be a process that requires some deeper soul searching and thinking. It may not come, roll off the tip of your tongue, but I think it actually can bring families together. And I like to use the example of having children as one that helps strengthen the case for conscious investing. My kids, my daughters too, but my son comes home from school and asks about Trash Island, and he started the environmental club in his classroom, and he's very interested in knowing about the health of our planet. And I set up a small debit for him every month into an ESG screen fund that is pro environment and not investing in companies that are doing harm to the environment. And we talk about what's in that fund and why. And it has opened up a whole new way to have a conversation rather than, okay, your money is in a bank, it's in a
Hmm.
fund, the fund is traded on the whatever stock exchange. It really has created a new entry point for that conversation around money with a child. And so I think that that can be really powerful to have that as a glue within a family.
No, that's a great lesson, especially with the kids, because
Hmm.
I struggled with some of those when you're talking. I got both of my kids are quickly, well, they are teenagers now, and and having those type of conversations, they're becoming more and more aware every day of the
Mhm.
things that are happening in this world.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
no, this has been a great conversation. I usually wrap things up by asking you one last question, but before I do, I want to
Yes.
make sure everybody has your contact information again. Head over to thegoodyourmoneycando.com, the Beyond Capital podcast. And my last question to you is, was there a question you wished I would have asked you today? It's a gotcha, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a hard one. I have to say, it's you know, I, I think really, I guess the question I like to answer is, what's the biggest lesson I've learned through this journey? Like, what's the most powerful
Sure.
message for me? And ultimately, it's that no investment is neutral. It's that everything we do, this is a simple and poignant statement, but everything we do has a positive, a negative, or negative impact.
Hmm.
And real estate or not real estate, when making an investment, thinking about all stakeholders is the key to this. Investing in leaders that are thinking about all stakeholders is the key to this, because it means that while these conversations may be complicated around, how do I value my customers versus my shareholders versus the environment versus the local community versus the government, all of these different stakeholders, um, being aware of them is really the best starting point for creating investments that have positive social and environmental impact. And so for me, that's been the most powerful messaging in making my money more consistent with my values and cleaning up my money or detoxifying it, however we want to say it. But it's really that no investment that we make is neutral.
Sure. No, I really appreciate this. This was a great conversation, and I hope you'd be consider coming back sometime. I think we could, like you said, we probably could spend an hour just talking about the exercise regarding defining your values, and that might be something that would be, if you're up for it, something that we should tackle sometime.
Would love that. Would love that, because there's a lot to unpack there. It's not even just your personal values and what you care about, but it's also maybe some of the qualities that you value in the world. So would love to unpack that with your audience, and I'm so grateful that we had this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.